Now for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning, let's bring in Arise analyst, Dr. Constance Ikoku. Thank you for joining us live on this newspaper review segment.
Good morning, Benga.
Always with a beautiful smile.
You too.
I hope we have something pleasant in the offing.
Well, let's see. Let's see. Good morning, Yolanda.
Good morning, Dr. Constance. Great to see you this morning.
Great to see you too. Well, there's a lot in the newspapers this morning shaping, the story shaping the agenda. So let's get right into it. Hello there and welcome to the program. We'll begin with this day newspaper. There, China rejects planned U.S. military action. EU says it stands by Nigeria. Ibadan court approves conduct of PDP convention, others INEC to monitor. Tinubu seeks another fresh approval for 1.15 trillion naira domestic loan to fund 2025 budget deficit. And Dick Cheney, powerful ex-vice president of the U.S. who pushed for Iraq war, dies at 84. Daily Sun, we still have that story on PDP National Convention, cleared to go ahead. Terrorism, again, Kanu refuses to enter defense, insists no valid charge against him. Alleged Christian genocide, China backs FG, warns the U.S. Senate probes railway projects under Buhari administration. And federal government declares emergency on police, civil defense training institutions, reveals NEC. Daily Independent, again, Tinubu asks Senate for fresh loans. AI adoption, Nigeria's insurance industry may cut jobs by half. Nigeria's insecurity fight stifled by disunity, says ex-army chief. And ECOWAS says acts of terrorism do not constitute genocide. Lagos Trade Fair complex probe sparks tough war in the House of Representatives, and DSS dismisses 115 personnel in clean sweep. The Guardian newspaper, Senate probes rail derailments as new loans, contract debts cause stir. Court gives Kanu till tomorrow to defend terrorism charges or waive right. And Dambazao blames police for Boko Haram insurgency. The Punch newspaper, 15% tariff. Nigerians to pay 1 trillion naira extra for petrol yearly. Lagos policemen treated us like criminals, says tech worker. And the NNPC eyes 20% stake in Dangote refinery. And Wike kicks as Oyo court lifts PDP convention ban. Moving on to Daily Trust, misinformation behind U.S.-Nigeria tension, according to experts, and DSS sacks over 100 officers. ACF marks Silver Jubilee, says seeks support for different initiatives, and contractors protest at National Assembly over debt. New Telegraph, U.S. military threat, China declares support for Nigeria, opposes Trump. We also have that story on the PDP. Then Ghana Navy arrests 10 Nigerian stowaways at Tema. Vanguard newspaper, again, Trump, while we reject U.S. threats on Nigeria, according to China. Talking about that budget deficit, Tinubu seeking fresh loans. Obaseki carpet, Okwewolo denies 600 naira billion debt, others. And troops kill Boko Haram terrorists during attack on military base in Borno State. Finally, to the leadership newspaper, National Petroleum Company plans raising stake in Dangote refinery to 20%. And Tinubu's 15% import tariff marks bold step towards 1 trillion naira economy, says billionaire businessman Femi Otedola. Let's now see the international papers, beginning with Daily Express. Reeves is just blaming everyone else for chaos, says the Tory leader, Kemi Bednock. The I newspaper, Reeves poised to raise income tax and break 50-year taboo. Financial Times, Cheney, remembered, former vice president who championed U.S. intervention, dies at 84. And compulsory financial literacy classes, part of England curriculum overhaul, very important there. The Times newspaper, still again on Reeves, she cannot get a break. Lays ground for 1970s style tax increase, and everyone is on her. Already taxes are high and no one wants to pay more, but she has to balance the budget, so it's a difficult job for her. Let's see the Daily Telegraph. Heads should roll over BBC bias. All right, that's that for international papers. Let's then return to this day newspaper to see the details of the lead stories. So the lead story here, I mean, it's geopolitics as China enters the fray, rejects planned U.S. military action, even as the EU also stands with Nigeria. Spokesperson from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mao Ning, says Nigeria should be allowed to handle its internal affairs. Equally, the European Union ambassador to the Economic Community of West African States, Gautier Mignot, told the news agency of Nigeria, and I quote, "Our position is one of solidarity with Nigeria, solidarity with the victims of violence, with the authorities working to protect citizens, and with the Nigerian people who overwhelmingly desire peaceful coexistence beyond ethnic and religious divide." He added that it's up to Nigeria to uphold and strengthen this environment of peaceful coexistence. Let's now see New Telegraph. There, U.S. military threat, China declares support for Nigeria, opposes Trump. There's more there. It says, will emerge stronger, says Tinubu. Extremists plotting to divide Nigeria, according to Information Minister. Then Khan says, we should stop twisting Trump's statement. Farumbi blames crisis on diplomatic negligence. Again, a lot coming up on that thread from the United States. On the Chinese part, you know, it really says that there should be no need for any country to use religious and human rights excuses to interfere in the affairs or local affairs of other countries, such as Nigeria. Yolanda, please go for it.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, it's very commendable that China is declaring support for Nigeria and standing up by saying that Nigeria deserves to withhold its sovereignty and to make its own decisions. But also, let's look at the aspect that China has a lot to gain. It has a large investment in the Nigerian market and with several significant benefits. We all know that there's so many raw material projects that are ongoing in Nigeria by the Chinese. There's a lot of market access and there's a lot of more investment opportunities and geopolitical influence when it comes to the affairs of the nation. So it's very commendable that China is standing with Nigeria, but as well, let's not forget that they have their own interest to protect as well.
Yeah, Benga, any quick thought before we go to the next story?
Yeah, I'm happy that yesterday came up with the news headlines about Tinubu now concluding plans and tightening the ropes to appoint ambassadors,
Yes.
because that shows
Yes.
the exigency and the intricacies of the requirements of an astute ambassador, at least to handle the grade A missions. And we've seen the Chinese collaboration standing with Nigeria, and the economic background interest of all this is also beginning to come out. But we shouldn't shy away from the fact that there are mass killings and Nigeria faces an existential threat. But the narrative of Christian Muslim is a bit offensive to us as Nigerians, and I'm happy to also see the European Union standing with Nigeria and emphasizing the need for the protection of human rights and also calling for interfaith dialogue in Nigeria. That would also help the narrative. So I hope that with this international support, growing international support for Nigeria, I think Trump should be able to sheath his rambunctious stance against Nigeria and the threat of military action. And I think that the federal government too knows that it's no longer a tea party and they need to face these underlying threats that Nigeria faces. People cannot just be dying. It's not acceptable anywhere in the world. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that an individual is entitled to the right of thought, conscience, and religion. So never nowhere in the world should this be restricted or threatened. And that's what we've been having. We have the facts and figures that in 7 years we've had about 16,000 Christians being killed. And in the last 7 months in this year, we have about 7,000. Muslims who have been killed, 6,000 Muslims. Even Muslim death should not even be allowed. Right. No death should be allowed in the country.
Well, I mean, it is interesting that it took this kind of pressure for the federal government to decide that it is going to appoint ambassadors very quickly because of that vacuum that we have in our diplomacy. And it is also good to see that they've opened that diplomatic channel, which the government has said, you know, to begin to dialogue and to talk concerning these issues that are raised. And the Minister of Information and National Orientation told us yesterday that the president is calm. He should be calm because you need to be calm and very calculated in this kind of instance. Absolutely. In order to manage something that is an inferno that can, excuse me, consume the country. But let's return to China. China calls Nigeria a friend. And China has taken time over the years to build friends and alliances all over the world, and especially in Africa. Nigeria is the biggest economy on the continent, so it has been working very closely with Nigeria. It does have strategic investments. But also China has also been building those alliances and exercising soft power through its Belt and Road Initiative, you know, which is operating in over 30 countries with different projects. So you see a country that is very focused and disciplined and has, you know, its own goals, short, medium, and long term, and is going ahead, proceeding with achieving those goals. So what do you learn from this? Nigeria has a lot to learn from this. China is no longer a pushover on the world stage. Its global influence is growing. It is the second biggest economy in the world after United States. So both countries are competitors. But you also see that China took time over the years. According to World Bank sources and even Chinese government sources, over 40 years, China lifted at least 100 million people out of extreme poverty in its country. 800 million people. That's a lot, and that's no mean feat. And there is no way it could have achieved this without discipline, absolutely, without focus, without strategy, without a plan, and executing that plan meticulously. So when you have a government that is working for its people, when you have a government that is achieving results over time, then the people have no choice but to fall in line. So I think there's so many things that, you know, Nigeria can learn from the Chinese. When you get to that stage where you have your act together, there's no way you will be a pushover on the international stage. And that is why in the Committee of Nations, China is today powerful compared to what it was some 40 or 50 years ago. You know, so, I mean, in Nigeria, you know, we've had a lot of conversation about what is going on. I think that people expect and want to see concrete plans from the government, concrete plans regarding, you know, stopping mass killings, taking steps to ensure that those that perpetuate religious and other forms of violence and extremism are brought to book. Concrete plans to see that those that sponsor, whether it's terrorism, whether it's all sorts of forms of violence, are also made to account for their failings. You know, so, I mean, a lot to talk about, but, you know, this is, again, we say an unfolding story, a running story, so there will be more tomorrow, and we will be bringing that to you. Let's take a second story from this day newspaper. Ibadan court approves conduct of PDP convention, others INEC to monitor. Party BOT wades into crisis as youth leaders pledge support for the new chairman, Mohammed Abdurrahman. Damago, other NWC members write electoral body. We also have that story in the Daily Sun where it also says that the court clears PDP to hold national convention. So this Oyo State High Court granted that approval, and this follows suspensions, as we already know, and counter suspensions by members of the National Working Committee on one another, and a federal high court order in Abuja that stopped the convention. So bear in mind that this latest court order is coming from Oyo State, where Seyi Makinde is governor and is also, sort of arrowhead of the convention and the governors that are on one side against the other faction of the party. So, Benga, my sense is that if this convention goes ahead, if it does eventually hold, there will be more crisis after that. What do you think? I mean, this is not the end of it.
Absolutely, I share your sentiments. And now you can see that there is a conflicting judgment, one from the Federal High Court that was pronounced by Justice James Omotosho, and now we have one in Oyo High Court from Justice Akintola, and we have a deeply divided PDP, one led by Seyi Makinde and also one led by the Wike faction. We have two, we don't even know who is the actual national chairman of the party, but everything is tied down to the flagrant disregard of internal structure, in equitable zoning structure of the party, and flagrant complete utter disregard for internal democracy of the party. All this, we've said it over time at the risk of sounding like a broken record, that everything started from that, and now there is an agitation over the South-South zonal leadership structure. We have one in Cross River State, Plateau State, and Akwa Ibom. So we have all this, and also within those that elected Abdurrahman Mohammed, we also have an internal crisis. While some states walked out yesterday, they stormed out of the meeting yesterday. So we've seen all this. So the parties are at the verge of an implosion. So it's left to be seen how much of a will they have to survive this looming implosion.
Menga, don't forget that there were 1,500 members of the PDP who defected to the APC. We took that report earlier on.
Absolutely.
So I just added this part on to mention that what's going on internally is really a big implosion, as you say, that's waiting just to happen.
All right, let's see a third story in this day. Tinubu seeks approval for fresh 1.15 trillion naira domestic loan to fund 2025 budget deficit. That story features also in the Daily Independent, where they have some added sub-stories. In the Daily Independent, it says the president has appointed Enugu Attorney General Ude as minister. Ostensibly, this is to replace former Minister Uche Nnaji, also from the same state. Uche Nnaji was compelled to resign following a certificate scandal. So the president also appointed John Nwabweze as tax ombudsman. So the report says the Senate leadership is divided over Trump Strait, but it's hardly divided over the heavy borrowing to fund the budget. Here, a very quick comment. Much has been said about the level of borrowing that is going on in the country. There's a revenue shortfall, although the taxes are increasing. The APC has absolute majority now, in the National Assembly, upper house and the lower house. So they will have very little, a whimper of a protest or hurdle or obstacle against whatever they want. Let's move quickly to the Punch newspaper, then we can comment on that. 15% tariff, Nigerians to pay 1 trillion naira extra for petrol yearly on petrol imports. A Punch analysis has shown this cost will be borne by Nigerians through higher pump prices once the policy is implemented. While it's additional revenue for government, it automatically translates to more expenses for households and businesses. The government says this policy aims to boost local refining and generate revenue. This 15% tariff will be placed on insurance, on duty costs, and freight value of imported diesel and petrol. Now, we have to know that Nigeria is yet to be in a position to provide all local consumption of petrol. It still imports, and that's why this new policy has attracted different opinions. Life is about to get tougher, Yolanda. Can you imagine the effects on the cost of transport?
Indeed,
that is already high.
The everyday Nigerian is actually not protected from all of these rising costs. But I also want to touch a little bit on what you said before, the report about Tinubu seeking 1.5 trillion naira in domestic loans. Now, just yesterday, Namibia made history with a record of $750 million debt repayment that was made in one day. This is literally history being made, a staggering amount of money being paid back. This is debts that were taken. And I think that Nigeria should look at cases such as this and learn from our neighboring countries. It's very jarring when we keep taking these reports that talk about the rising costs in the nation and the need to constantly take out more loans over and over and over again. I think this year alone, we've had so many of these reports that we keep repeating. And unfortunately, it's the Nigerians that pay the ultimate price. Just as you rightly pointed out, the cost of transportation now is going to skyrocket. We are approaching the festive season where naturally things tend to go up every single year. But now with fuel going up again, it's just a bit too much.
All right, very quickly to Leadership newspaper, if we can pull that up. Court gives Kanu November 5th ultimatum to defend self against terrorism charge. And in the Vanguard newspaper also, alleged terrorism have no case to answer. Let me go, Kanu says. So the detained leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, blatantly refusing to open his defense against a 7-count terrorism charge, insisting there is no valid charge against him. He says there's no legal basis for the charge. He is challenging the court to try him over an offense he said is unknown to any extant law. He accused the court of violating a Supreme Court judgment that condemned his extraordinary rendition from Kenya. Benga, very quickly, this looks like Kanu's last chance to open his defense, after which it will be interesting to see how this case proceeds. You know, he's standing his ground.
Okay.
Very quickly.
The court has consistently stood against his no case submission, and now it's either they take what he had narrated, that there is no extant law in which that supports his allegation. But his lawyer claimed, or he claimed rather, that the law of terrorism has been repealed. But we know that the one of 2013, the Anti-Terrorism Legislative Act, was repealed in 2020. But in 2022, President Buhari signed the Terrorism Prohibition and Prevention Act. So we will need we'll need more clarity to be sure that there is no law, there's no extant law supporting his terrorism allegation. But he has the case will continue today at the risk of going sub judice. We'll want to see how this plays out. But the court has consistently maintained that there is no provision for his no case submission. So he has the choice of either the court adopting what he had issued, that there is no case standing against as his defense, and while he would need to write a reply against the prosecuting counsel. But one major thing that his defense counsel, if we can still call him his defense counsel, Justice Barrister Kanu Agabe said, was that according to Section 36, subsection 12 of the Constitution, a person is entitled to a fair hearing within a reasonable time limit. And this trial is extending beyond any reasonable time limit. So I think that calls for the judiciary to revisit the need for speedy dispensation of justice.
Okay, more to come on that trial. Let's move quickly to the international headlines, starting with Guinea, where, you know, we don't know what the shape of the presidential elections next month will be like. I guess the background of the fact that the military leader who took over in a coup about 4 years ago has now changed his mind and decided to run for presidential elections next month. General Mamadi Doumbouya had, he had deposed 83-year-old Alpha Condé on corruption charges and economic mismanagement, among other accusations. So he promised that the military would be, out of their faces in no time. Now he thinks that it's good for him to run. So he's going to be running the elections. The questions will be whether that election will be free and fair. Will he be willing to accept the result if he does not win the election? And besides, the major opposition leaders are barred from contesting, including Alpha Condé. Anyway, people say Alpha Condé shouldn't be running again at 83. Let's move on to Washington Post. New York, in New York, where Zora Mamdani has won the election for the mayoral contest, so he's going to become mayor. His closest rival, Andrew Cuomo, had that endorsement from President Donald Trump, which he quickly disassociated himself from, because, I mean, Trump is not, you know, popular now. He's down in the polls by 70%. But Cuomo was running against a younger, more popular anti-establishment candidate, and it's a remarkable victory for him. And moving on to the Financial Times, where former Vice President of the U.S., Dick Cheney, has passed at 84. He's being remembered. He was a very hawkish politician and was the one that convinced the president then to intervene in quite a number of countries in the Middle East. And finally, to Daily Mirror, plea after tax raise hint. Make it fair, Rachel. Rachel is facing so much anger from the British public over tax raises. No respite for her. She has a tough job. Yolanda.
Let me touch quickly on the story that's going on. Yes, in less than a minute. And the story that's going on with the presidential race in Guinea. And, you know, I want to point out a few things that the opposition is actually saying. First of all, they're saying he's not a credible source because he's already broken his first promise, which was to hand over power. They're also mentioning that this man has a French passport. He trained in the French Foreign Legion. He has lived in France. His wife is French. You know, they are really hammering on this French connection and the fact that Guinea resources are still in the hands of French companies, and he's not saying anything about it. So we wait and see what happens with that. But I thought it was very interesting to point out these things because we've been having these issues, especially in the Sahel region, concerning how the French are, you know, taking over or still trying to hold and maintain power in the region. So to see Guinea going through this, I don't know, will it be another case of our African leaders who just come and take over by force? We wait and see. About Zoran Mandami, I mean, congratulations to him. We all saw it coming. First Muslim mayor of New York. He is kind of the mayor of the Gen Z. The Gen Zs, you know, he's very popular with that. And as you rightly pointed out, Trump has not been a very big fan of him. But we wait and see what his tenure has to hold and if he will stand up to what is required to be a mayor of such a pivotal state as New York.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, quickly.
Doesn't this reflect the sentiment against, the background sentiment of the cost of living in U.S. now with the government shutdown?
Yeah, I mean, he ran on that, you know, talking about the cost of living and how he wants to make sure that New York City becomes a city not only for the wealthy, but for the common man. That's part of the reasons why he won. And also that his closest rival was no longer popular anyway. You know, he had those sex allegations when he was governor and he was disgraced out of office. So the man had, you know, the coast clear for him. And to Guinea, Yolanda, you know, a lot of the former presidents in French former French colonies are married to French women. So it's not new at all. You know, you have the French embedded in those countries very much so. All right, those were your headlines for today.
Absolutely. Well said, Dr. Constance. Thank you so much for driving the newspaper review.